Wow, wow. Wow, wow.
Hello and welcome to In the Court of the Wenton King. I hope you've had a nice time. This week we are doing
Songs from a Memory. Yeah. So we hello. Yeah, we're doing Songs from a Memory. So this follows on from our Images and Words video, obviously, which was 3 weeks ago. There's kind of 3 significant things we have to talk about before we get to here, which defines this moment. And the one is obviously Falling into Infinity. That whole period, and we talked about that they had a real problem with the record company since this was the 90s. The fact that they had a hit with Images and Words was a hindrance. Actually, that was a disaster, and it happened to be Pull Me Under and not Another Day or any of those songs. It just happened to be. So obviously they had this pressure from the record company saying, well, you just have to do that again and magic will happen and MTV will play it. And of course MTV will never play anything they ever do because they're MTV and they're arseholes. So they went heavier, and then that didn't work. It sold less than the previous album, and then, well, the proper pressure came on, and they had to. Well, you have to be commercial now. Can't have any long solos or any of that business. And there was a lot of pressure. I mean, what we didn't mention when we did Falling into Infinity was that one of the songs on Falling into Infinity is co-written by the guy that wrote Living on a Prayer. That's how far it had gone. That's down that road. I couldn't tell you which song because it doesn't mean it's as good as Living on a Prayer because it's that bloke. It's that blinkered view, isn't it? That if it's just the same people again, the same thing will happen, like a business.
Yeah.
Stupid. So of course it didn't make any difference to the sales. It was much the same. They were on the brink of falling out as well. You got Portnoy and Petrucci are the real leaders of the band, and they were on the brink of falling out. I think Portnoy blamed John Petrucci for selling out. Although there is an argument that actually at the time Mike Portnoy was into it when it wasn't that good. I think he probably changed his mind. So it was all falling apart really, and so Mike Portnoy said, right, either we stop this, we do it properly, recognise the two of them as the leaders of the band, we make the music we're supposed to make that the fans actually keep asking us for us to make, or we forget it because there's no point in continuing. It was miserable, they were all unhappy. So this was a result of that. The other thing that had happened, sadly, of course, was James LeBrie had a vocal accident, if you like, just before the Awake tour in '94. He had some food poisoning and was throwing up, and it stretched his vocal cords or something, when you're retching, and it did long-term damage. And he was told, "Do not sing for a year." He couldn't do that. He had to go out on tour. Actually, on the Awake tour, from what I've heard of it, he sounded really good. So it took time to damage his voice, but it did damage his voice. And you listen to the live album in '99 or '98, it's definitely affected his voice. I do think that style of vocals is fundamentally never going to sound that good live. He's always flat, and he always was flat. The difference is in the early days he could do heavy, and that's a rare thing. I mean, Bruce Dickinson can kind of do it, but often these operatic kind of singers don't have that heaviness, and he did have that heaviness, and he lost that. And I think perhaps the way he developed so much technique was a flawed approach, I think, actually, and he was never going to be completely on the notes live. On album he still sounds fine, he still sounds really good, I think, but there was a definite deterioration, and that slowly improved over time. So that was another thing. The third thing is the keyboard player. Kevin Moore, the original keyboard player. People are big fans of Kevin Moore because I think what he brought to it, I thought it felt so, at the time you wouldn't have realised it was there. Although he's the person, he's got a songwriter's mentality, and he wrote a lot of the material as well. So there was a big change, and they got the other guy, whose name escapes me, sorry, to do that in between period with Change of Seasons and Falling into Infinity. And he's good. He's a great keyboard player, but he was always benefiting from them rather than the other way around. And around that time, of course, they did Liquid Tension Experiment, which was basically instrumental Dream Theater but with Tony Levin and Jordan Rudess. Now originally they wanted Jordan Rudess to place Kevin Moore, but he didn't want to do it because he just had a kid, and I think he was offered Dixie Dregs and Dream Theater, so he chose Dixie Dregs because there'd be less touring. So the second time round they got him back, which sort of completed the situation that created this, which is a prog album. And you can see they've deliberately drawn the fans back in. Now at this point I'd given up on Dream Theater. I thought, oh well, they're just going to sound like that now, like everybody does. And it was only because I saw this in the record shop, and just by the fact that it was Metropolis 2 and the fact that it was obviously a concept album was enough to think, actually, they've gone back to what they should have been doing in the first place. So that it was a very clever bit of marketing. Of course, Metropolis Part 1, they were just being pretentious. There was no intention to have a Part 2, really. It's just the thing they did later on. There was a demo version, a sort of 20-minute version of it, during the Falling Into Infinity sessions, which would never have been allowed on the album due to suits. And what you get is an album that sounds like Dream Theater. The difference is what Jordan Rudess brings to the table. And for some people, that's a bad thing. Because you have a lot of solos now. That you have bits that are written complex, which you already had. But now there's loads of solos as well. So you've got sort of 2 John Petrucci's going on. And for some people, that's just too much. And then, well, they just go back to songs, just the songs. But people forget you get the songs as well. And I still think the songs on this are better than the songs on Falling Into Infinity. So in that sense, it's the purest Dream Theater album. It's Dream Theatering for 77 minutes of Dream Theatering, and it's a fantastic album. It's a great concept album, and it goes with all those classics. I don't put it on the same pedestal as The Lamb or anything like that, or The Wall. It's the next tier down from that, I think. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, Kev. I actually think the concept itself, when I first realised what it was, I thought that's pretty lame, bit new age.
It is very, yeah.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter. You know, I did have some. Oh my god, they really are. Yes, with
Metallica.
With Metallica, but I mean, it's not so bashing over the head and all that kind of thing. It doesn't.
Really, there's no Buddhist business going on.
So you get a few snippets of the psychiatrist or whatever he is.
But
it doesn't really matter.
It's like The Wall in that it is open to interpretation emotionally. That can mean anything. It doesn't have to be this weird convoluted story that's apparently someone goes to a hypnotist and sees their past life, and it turns out that they were murdered. But I think maybe in another past life they were the lover of the person that was murdered, and it turned out that they'd been caught with the other guy and he'd killed them. But then at the end it turns out that the hypnotist is the person that killed them and kills them again. Or something. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter. It's just lots of riffs and then cool songs.
Yeah.
There's an element of switching between heavy, complex thing, epic song, heavy, complex thing, epic song, which is a bit... I only noticed that years later.
You do notice it because it is 77 minutes. You know, you are wading through it. Luckily, I mean, that's more than a car journey for me. That's probably 2 car journeys. So if I'm listening to it in the car, it actually splits it up quite nicely.
Yeah.
It's not so noticeable. I do think one of the main issues... probably a year ago, I wouldn't have liked this as much as I do now.
That's interesting.
So my taste has developed after all these cool albums we've been listening to. The one thing I do notice about Dream Theater, I don't know if I might have made this point in the last video, is occasionally they get the wrong tone. So on The Wall just has these amazing moments of epicness where just suddenly there's a change and it all comes together. It's like massive emotional impact. And I think Dream Theater do really well on the build up to those moments, but when they execute those moments, it doesn't quite work. Like there's a moment in Fatal Tragedy where you're expecting it to go all heavy and Black Sabbath, and it starts and you get excited, and then it picks up a little bit and turns a bit positive, and it's a little bit disappointing. So that's kind of a taste thing more than anything else.
Yes, and I think that's a modern rock thing. And you have to think about Dream Theater is that they tread the line very carefully, and that they're trying to be commercial. I think they're a bit delusional at this point, in that there was a belief that they could cross over. A couple of years later, they still believed they could cross over into a much more commercial arena, which is nonsense, obviously. But that's what they believed, obviously, and so they tread a line where they're being very modern, and that modern at this point, of course, just means everything's sort of at the same level all the way through. You can't do that like The Wall does.
Yeah.
Because it'll scare people, and that's the Metallica-iness, and it makes everything homogenised, and so it all just sounds like Dream Theater.
And it pulls it down to the tier below.
Yeah.
All those bands. I mean, there's some really good stuff on here, really exciting stuff.
It is their Tales from Topographic Oceans. It is better than Topographic Oceans, I'd say. Yeah, I think better than Topographic.
I agree. I just think in about 10 years' time, I'm going to think, all this boring stuff. Oh no, I'll put a Yes album on. Oh, this is great. It's going to take 10 years though. So yeah, it's I really liked it. I mean, I've been a bit sceptical about Dream Theater until listening to Octavarium, and then I realised, yeah, they have got something. It's not perfect, but it's
their
good.
thing, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I do like concept albums to have a bit of weight behind. Is that true? I mean, if you consider Abbey Road a concept album, there's nothing particularly weighty there.
It's just musically though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Really, in the end. Musically, it all fits together and hangs together. And to a certain extent, that was a fluke with Abbey Road. Obviously, because they were just disparate individuals, you know.
Yeah. I mean, a really good concept album, say, like Dark Side of the Moon, you can't turn it off. Whereas this, because it's so long, you can zone in and zone out, and it doesn't... I should imagine there are Dream Theater fans out there who listen to every single beat on this with relish. But I think the sort of journey you've got to go on to get there is quite long and convoluted, whereas with the great albums like Dark Side, it takes a couple of listens to get into, and then you're there and you love it.
But yeah.
Whereas I think with Dream Theater, because it's so complex, so dense, so many changes, and so long, you can't really do that.
Something I haven't mentioned actually. I think the thing that really hooked me back in and thought, this is better than old Dream Theater. This isn't just a return to old Dream Theater. This is better. Was Jordan Rudess brought two things to the table. He brought more than Kevin Moore, and loved just endless soloing, but also the thing about that density and the metallic-ness and the homogenised nature of it. It is Jordan Rudess's contribution compositionally, which actually the times it breaks out of that, when you suddenly get a honky tonk piano. Or I don't know, is it a honky tonk piano? I don't know, but that kind of thing, Hollywood sort of thing. It's kind of epic, but kind of filmy.
Yeah.
That gives it a different dimension to me. That really, really helps and stops it being boring riff rock.
I mean, they tick most boxes.
Yeah.
Composition, arrangement, style of music. It's just sometimes they just don't get it quite right. I think.
But there's some great stuff on here. I think the second act is where the really good stuff is mostly. Home is a very popular song. That's is it harmonic? Probably harmonic minor. Wow, 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 kind of stuff. Obviously, that's very popular. But the Dance of Eternity, which is actually an edit. So on the album, it's an edit of all these different bits to really... The idea is obviously that the whole thing is Metropolis Part 2, and they reference Metropolis, and they do different things with those Metropolis themes all the way through. But it's Dance of Eternity is that thing that Dream Theater kind of became defined as, times 50,000, but it's edited together from bits. So once they made the album, they had to learn it. So for me, there's a reason to see the live version because of that, because they're performing it, and there's actually a near train wreck where it sounds like they've just added a little bit of rest, where it just carries on for a little bit, but it was actually a mistake, and then recovered. But so playing that thing live is fantastic. Obviously, there's the problem with the vocals live, in that the vocals will never be as good live. They'll never be completely on track, completely. People forget though, this was like a 4-hour concert. They did the whole album, and then they did a whole Dream Theater concert. What's on the DVD is edited. They did everything else as well. They did most songs in 4 hours. And
we're going to play Dream Theater.
And he sings consistently. Change of the Seasons is on here. That's the final encore after 4 hours, and he sounds just as good as he did at the start. So it's easy to forget that. And he certainly sounds better than he did on the previous live album.
I've always considered the vocals to be the letdown of Dream Theater, though.
He sticks his tongue out.
There's times when I think it sounds a bit Oasis-y there.
But obviously he had whatever problem and he had to overcome it, and whatever he's doing is to make it sound acceptable, at least without his voice breaking. And and a couple of years before this, if you hear the sort of official bootlegs and things like that, his voice was breaking all over the place. So he's had to work really hard to keep it going, and he did. So fair enough. So yeah, it's a great album. So I think it's 5-egg album. I listening to it again, I realised I know the whole album. I didn't really need to listen to it. I actually listened to 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence, the next album, because I realised I know the whole album. It's one of those things where I know every note, so it does mean years ago I listened to this a lot. The reason why there isn't a CD here is because I was mugged for my car about 15 years ago, and the CD was in the car. And with the insurance money, I got the DVD instead of the album, and never got the album again, interestingly. I think that's probably because by then I'd heard it so much. And it was interesting when you saw it for the first time 5 years ago.
Yeah, it was about 11 o'clock at night, wasn't it, when we started it?
We didn't mean to. It was just put
just
on,
came on.
and it just carried on, didn't it? And then we've watched the whole thing, and that was a strange revisit. And I hadn't listened to it all that time. I hadn't listened to it at all, and still knew it so well. So that was very strange. And I noticed the flaws more. I think, particularly the way it's structured so obviously with heavy epic like that.
Yeah, I agree. It's a 5 egg album. I mean, 4 egg albums. I tend to think I'm glad I've listened to it. I've enjoyed it.
It's a good album.
Am I going to listen to it again? Am I going to put it in the car? Maybe not. This,
Yeah, it's special.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to listen to that again.
Yeah,
it's on my playlist. So, yeah, good album.
Mm.
I actually think if we actually pulled our finger out and made music, this is the kind of stuff we'd probably make.
Probably with a twist.
Yeah,
I would be fighting against the Metallicaisms, particularly that was really emphasised by doing it King Crimson in the middle. In that you don't have to do that. It doesn't have to be this faintly ridiculous manly man rock Black Album riffs. It can be heavy, really heavy, and doesn't have to be that homogenised sound.
Yeah. Blah 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 blah.
Blah blah music.
Blah.
Blah blah stuff. The spirit carries everywhere.